Welcome, Abhijit Sinha, to Clown Spirit Podcast. Abhi, thank you so much for being here. It's really a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure for me.
Now you're in Bangalore at this point, right?
Yes, I'm in Bangalore. I live here. I've been here for the last 10 years. I grew up in Mumbai, although
Ah,
I'm in a big city, I have come from a bigger city and from a more intense and busy environment. So Bangalore is a little bit less intense and less busy, although it's catching up quite fast.
and how long ago did you move?
10 years, 11 years now. Yeah, I moved here just after I finished university. And I had the choice of, so I got a job and I could choose between a couple of different cities. And Mumbai was out because my parents were still staying there. And I didn't want to be in the same city. I'd have to stay in the house. So I chose Bangalore. At the time, it was fun sounding city where everybody was young and the weather was great. And it was the upcoming metropolitan. So I moved here in 2000, actually late 2013. Yes, it's been a while.
Yeah, 12 years almost.
Yeah.
But when you moved to Bangalore, things changed for you pretty quickly as far as I know. I've been listening to your TED Talk, which we'll put the link for that in the podcast notes so people can check it out. But I'd love you to tell this story of kind of what happened that inspired the work that you do now and that you're so successful at and dedicated to right now. This sort of transformation that occurred I think when you first moved to Bangalore, pretty much.
Yeah. So the funny thing is this, that growing up in at my home, and this is of course very common in Indian homes, that you hear this very often, that work hard now and sacrifice a few birthdays and go out a little bit less, study hard, put in a lot of effort, and do just get the good marks, because one day you will finish school and you will finish university and you'll get a job, and then you will have money and you will have therefore all the freedom and happiness. That this is the standard that I heard in my house, I heard in my friends' houses, I heard, now I hear it all over the world. It was always the same thing, that the happiness and freedom await when you're 25, making good income, and then you can do whatever you want with your life. And I moved to Bangalore inches away from that freedom and inches away from that happiness. And the first day I walked into work, this beautiful office in a tech park, beautiful glass building, and nice carpets inside, and very sterile, and bean bags and colors. And it was a software job. And the moment I walked in, and people turned to look at you to see who's this new guy who's coming into the office, and I saw their faces. They all turned around the same time. It's like a picture burnt into my memory. And when I saw them, I just instinctively felt that nobody here is happy or free. Nobody here looks like they really experience happiness or freedom. And I was right. The next few months that I spent there, I worked for about 6 months or so. And every day I would hear the same thing. Every morning, I would be in my cubicle, and then all my other team members would come, and they were like 2 or 3 years older than me. And they would kick back on their chair, turn around, and say, Abhijit, you know what? You just wait and watch. I'm gonna leave in 3 months. I'm gonna follow my passion. I'm gonna be a musician. I'm gonna be an artist. I'm gonna start my company. Just 3 more months. I'm just about to quit. And the very same day, the manager would take us out for drinks. And by the end of the week, there would be a party. By the end of the month, there would be a gift that the company would send. And then there would be a retreat or a trip to a foreign country. And the guy who's complaining would forget about the complaint, come back the next day and complain again. And it was not just one, it was almost everybody just complaining every day, but not really doing anything. I spent a good, I think, 9 months there, and I never saw anybody leave. I saw a bunch of people getting promoted instead. And it terrified me. I couldn't imagine living my life where I'm just constantly complaining about what I'm doing and constantly thinking that I will do what I want to do in the future. So I just quit. I had no ideas, I had no plans. I didn't even know what I'm going to do. There was no Defy or nothing. I just quit cold turkey and told my director that I'm not going to come from tomorrow, and there will be no notice period, no nothing. It's just you can keep whatever is the balance that you have to pay me, but I just can't take it one more day. That was the beginning. This was how I left out of fear, out of trying to get away. There was no like this. I think many people start nonprofits and with a dream that they have of something they want to do. I had a nightmare. I didn't have a dream. I had this nightmare of this person I was going to become. And I was just running away from that nightmare. And serendipity took over. By the next day, I found myself traveling to a village that in a truck that I had no idea, where exactly that village was. Or even the name, I did not get it properly, but I just moved in with a bunch of people who were moving there and left the city of Bangalore and moved a couple of about 40, 45 kilometers away to a small village. And that's where things started really. Like when we were, and when the cancer was out, then I could actually begin.
It's so interesting. It's like people typically, as you say, they run away to join something. To,
Yeah.
like we say, people run away to join the circus, whatever the circus is. And you just ran away. You, I can't take this. I'm leaving. When that's really rare, I
Yeah.
think.
And the same day when I quit, my friend invited me to meet him near his office. And he used to work at a place I really wanted to work at some months ago. And the very same day I had quit, the same day those guys offered me a job, twice the salary. I'm like, wow, I'm really being tested here.
Wow, that's amazing. So that, yeah, the universe was saying,
Yeah.
wait, you sure you want to leave?
Yeah. It was
And
hilarious.
you really had the resolve to do that. And I bet that, I wonder if your work companions were jealous. Were they like, wow, he actually did it. He actually left.
No, that's not what I heard. What I heard was the opposite. Actually, they were, are you, don't do this. You're being stupid. This is such a nice company. The same people who complain about it every day
Hmm.
suddenly became very rational and realistic and wanted to tell me that I was gonna make a mistake and this doesn't sound like a good idea. And I think I found it strange at that time, but eventually I understood that actually my leaving was really challenging. It was making them confront the fact that they were not. And so they were finding a way to justify staying. So the most common thing I heard was, you know what, just stay for a few years, build some income, put a bit of a bank balance, and then you go and follow your passion. That's what I'm doing. And that's the right way. That's how you can get out and not fail. So it was in some ways a way to justify their approach. And I'm not one to say that their approach is right or wrong. I just didn't feel it in my bones that staying longer will help me in quitting. I felt it'll do the opposite.
It was a very brave thing to do, maybe stupid thing to do to leave. But I, just before you keep going with the story, when I say stupid, I mean in a really positive way.
I always been stupid in a positive way.
Yeah, because for me, I know that when Dan connected us to have this podcast interview, he explained that it's about clowning, and the point of these podcasts is to, in a way, see where clowning exists in different walks of life out there in the world, but we don't necessarily call it clowning. And I think that this is a great example because you defying, that convention and receive wisdom about being sensible and staying in a job till you have enough money to have fun. You just going, no, I can't do this. I need to leave. I have no other thing to go and do. I'm jumping off the edge of the cliff. It is a very clown-like action.
Yeah.
To me, it's like the epitome of how to put clowning into
Yes.
action in life, not on
Yeah.
stage, but in life.
100%. I think that just like in clowning, in order to do or to leave the job, it was not enough to just quit the job. You had to reject a version of society. You had to reject a version of reality. And this reality was sold to me as the only reality, that this is, it's very strange, and therefore you need to be a little bit stupid to reject what you've been trained to believe is the only version of reality, which means there's a possibility that there might be no reality that you would end up with. Of course, that's not what happened, but I think that was indeed a very important moment, which I don't think I could have justified to anybody. And that rejection required being stupid, being and not taking yourself so seriously, to be able to allow the next step in life to not be clearly visible yet. So yes, I think
Yeah,
that's a
beautiful. So, having stepped off the edge of this cliff, you move to this little village and take us into that moment.
so the suddenly I had time in so many years. For the first time I had time. There was another organization that was staying there, and they let me stay and all that, but I just helped them for a little bit. But then the rest of the day we had a lot of time to play frisbee and just chill in the banana plantation. And I think that's what I stopped wearing footwear for the entire year, because it just felt so natural to live in this environment, and felt like I was a child again. And again, many years later, I connected the dots that the oldest memory I had of being a child was walking in the rain. And I didn't feel that feeling again for 20 years, until I was in this village and with free time, no agenda, nothing on my mind. Just I could just walk in the rain and be completely present in that moment. So it was a huge turning point to have this time and to start thinking. And so two things were happening simultaneously, one of which I've talked about in the TEDx talk, where I would go to this little tea shop in the corner, and there would be these kids who would come out of school around 3:30 or so. And I would also be sitting there, and a couple of the guys from the organization. And we would just be sitting there and having tea, and I would be playing Temple Run. And these kids they started forming up and watching. We didn't have a medium to communicate in those days. I understood none of the languages they spoke, and they did not
Wow.
understand my
So you had no
emotions.
way of talking to them. You were just there
Yeah,
playing this game on your phone.
exactly. And they would just keep watching until one day one of the kids just puts his hand forward and asks for the phone. And in a moment of leap of faith, I give it to him, assuming that, okay, it's going to be a couple of minutes. He will not understand what to do with it, and he'll give it back to me. And he didn't do that. Instead, he ran away with the phone and got surrounded by other kids, and the phone disappears in a crowd. And for 20 minutes, it never comes back. And then I peep in to see what's happening, and the phone's actually with the fourth, fifth kid, and they're playing my game, Temple Run, as if they've always been playing. So this was the starting point of that challenged that hey, I thought that these kids, nobody has a computer here, nobody's teaching computers here or smartphone, none of this stuff was there. And somehow these kids were playing games on my iPhone without pausing for a break. Like, this was like, how do they know how to do this? So this was one thread where this little incident became an experiment. I invited kids for playing games on laptops without any instructions, anything. And in a couple of hours, they found themselves on the laptop, and they found themselves playing games on the internet. And nobody told them what to do. Nobody told them how to use the keyboard. They were young, like small kids, 13, 14 years, 12 years. And all they had as a source of learning was that I was sitting on my laptop and playing games, and that's it. So we were just mimicking and dancing, and our interaction was so wordless. There was no language. There was just this, yeah, we just started sharing this space and doing more and more. On the other hand, I was also playing with the idea that if I'm running away from this idea of society and reality and the idea of corporate work and all of these things, if I'm rejecting that, then what am I accepting? What is the new reality? What do I do now? And so I decided that I need to redo my education because it was entirely based on the notion of contributing to economy. It was wrong from the get-go. It was wrong from the time I started learning alphabets. It was already wrong. The reasons were wrong. So it doesn't matter what I learned. And so how can I start learning for the sake of happiness, for the sake of fulfillment, for the sake of doing something that I might find worthwhile? So as we were doing these experiments and as these kids were coming, and we started organizing a little space that we got for free, and we started creating a learning space between us without knowing, without really consciously thinking that we are doing this. We started creating a learning environment where we could just be ourselves, and every morning we could think, okay, what are we going to do today? And if we had consensus, then all of us would learn something together today. If we didn't, then we would do different things, but in the same space. So, in effect, I was building a school for myself. I had no intention of building a school or a learning space for these kids. But then these kids were also doing that. They were also not thinking about it, but they were also building a school for themselves. And it just happened so that we were in that same space and building this thing together. It had no name, it had no identity. There were no Excel sheet plans. There was no curriculum, no structure. It was just gather and decide. And we did that for a few months, and it became so popular. So popular. It was, we got a bunch of laptops donated. I put a bunch of tools on the wall, and every day we started building stuff and using YouTube and finding new things to do. And just people from all over started coming from even the nearby villages, and older people, not just kids anymore. People who were 20, 30, 40, even 60 years old were coming to that space and being very curious. Wow, what's happening here? And they would ask me, what company are you from? No company. Who do you represent? Nobody. I don't represent anyone. There's no signboard outside, nothing. And we were never hosting any classes or anything. It's as more and more people came, it's the children who took over, and they started creating subgroups and smaller groups, and they would do some things together, and they would figure out what they were going to learn. So at one point we were like 60, 70 learners, 70 people in the space, and they're just coming together and doing whatever they want based on their interests and their curiosities and their needs. Sometimes they're fixing bicycles or putting lights on them. Sometimes they're making clothes which have LEDs on it. Sometimes we're making a machine that can keep the dog on the street entertained by throwing balls. Just very random things. But in that randomness was a lot of effort and focus and thought that just everybody was bringing to the table, and nobody was telling anybody to do it. And this was like, I had never been in a space like that. And somehow I was creating it with them, but I had never been in a space where everybody cared so much about being there and about doing something. I had been in schools where you tried your best to just somehow hack that system and get away from it. The somehow you wait for the lectures to get over, and you would celebrate if a teacher does not come. This is what I was used to. I'm sure this is what the kids were used to, but it felt very different.
That's what school, I think that's the most common experience, probably all around the world, in many parts of the world, of school as something you have to endure, at least the part where you're in the classroom anyway, and dealing with the teachers, and you look forward to the breaks and playing and extracurricular activities, after school activities, where you're given a little bit more freedom to play. It sounds almost as though you're putting that after school extracurricular thing in the center of everything, the heart of everything.
Yes, I think that's definitely a way to see it. But I call it getting rid of the Sunday training. The I used to think that, okay, schools are boring because maybe teachers don't know how to make it interesting. Okay, maybe that's the reason. But later on, I think I started believing that schools are boring intentionally. The idea of enduring school is not accidentally. I feel that it is intentional. And the reason it should be intentional is the same reason why I was lied to when I was a child, that there will be happiness and freedom when you grow up. The reason it is intentional is that no, there is no happiness and freedom when you grow up. The 20 years of schooling, or the so whatever 15 years of schooling, is not so that one day you become happy and free. It is so that one day you stop asking for happiness and freedom. You don't ask somebody, you don't try to train somebody to be a great chef by telling them to not cook for 15 years. That doesn't make any sense. We would want them to cook. And then the more they cook, the better they get. But so if it was about freedom, then we should keep getting more and more freedom. But this is not the case. They're not getting more and more freedom, we're getting less and less of freedom. And so the training is so that you stop asking for happiness and freedom, and you stop thinking that in your day-to-day routine, in the larger part of your life, just like when you went to school, the larger part of the time was boring, and then there was the small parts, small pieces where you could get some time to play with your friends or some time to hang out, those reliefs in between, that you must find your happiness in the reliefs, not in the main system, not in the main part. Because when you go to work, that's exactly what's going to happen. And you have to not expect happiness from your Monday to Saturday of work. You must expect all your happiness on Sunday. And therefore, I call it Sunday training, because we're training children to believe that one day all the happiness must come from Sundays and or vacations, timeouts, because otherwise you're supposed to be extremely frustrated, in misery, unhappy, and constantly destroying yourself. And that will be the version of success. Yeah.
Again, to connect a little clowning philosophy, for me, that clowning is very much about the marginality, the margins, the edges, the cracks, the liminal space, the things that fall outside of the mainstream,
Yeah.
and drawing attention to those things. So the clown is the one that maybe falls in the cracks or fails in order to show us the value of failure, or just is having frivolous fun for no reason and reminding us why that's important, or in many different ways. But the clown is bringing the edges into focus, bringing the things that are normally like hazy and fall outside of our normal way of being and of seeing, and reminding us of the importance and reminding us of how ridiculous we are to live this automated life that we do.
I think it was very, somehow I had an instinct for it when I was a child. I did pretty well in school, and everybody, all the teachers liked me, and I got good scores. And I didn't have to work that hard to do that. It was easy. However, there was always a few people in school who were consistently failing at class, in the exams, constantly being humiliated, constantly being pushed to the corner and the back benches. And I always had some connection with them. I always felt that it's not they who are wrong. And sometimes I was even jealous that they can be, they're just able to be themselves, even in an environment where everybody's gonna think that they're being completely stupid and completely obnoxious, but still they're able to stay with that. And so I was always able to be very close without even knowing why. I feel that probably they are more right than the majority of people who have learned very well to compromise, including myself, just being able to fit into that, into the middle layer. But yeah, they were constantly showing what was possible, how natural living should actually look like. They would not put their head down when the teacher's saying, put your head down. They would not shut up because you're not supposed to. This doesn't make sense. This is slavery. This is not supposed to be normal. But because all of us were told that no, it's being civilized when everybody tells you that you should just shut up for the next 2 hours and you had to take permissions before you go and pee somewhere. Like this is not normal. But poor guys, like they suffered so much. They suffered for being themselves and for showing this truth from the back benches because the rest of the people were just better at compromising and waiting for Sundays. They couldn't wait for Sundays. They had to live their life now. And yeah.
So, in a sense, then you were, as you said, you were going back to school, redoing your own education through in this new way that was inspired by the children. You were taking the lead from them and constructing something new.
Yes, I never saw these kids. Sure, they lived in a village and they probably had far less resources than I had or my family who comes from a middle class city urban environment. Sure, but besides that, I in I found that there were so many things that they were doing that I just couldn't do. I even the simplest thing, like just being able to fully be happy in a moment, be able to hold a conversation and not think about something else. Kids were able to do that. They were able, and nobody was like sending them to Ivy League schools or anything like that. They were built, they had this very naturally. I didn't have these things. And so it almost was a selfish reason to make sure that these kids are around and this space is constructed because there's only one person who's getting impacted, who needs this impact, and that's me. And these kids are actually showing me what's a much better way to live, what's a much more what's a better way to learn, what's a better way to make relationships, what's
Yeah.
a better way to be okay with failures and difficulties. I was terrible at these things. I had no sense of self and a very fragile ego. And the idea of success was how much income can I build and how big a house can I buy? And they were completely thrashing these ideas. They were like the most important philosophers in my life somehow.
Well, this one thing this is making me think about, and what I want to, in a moment, I want to get onto how this has evolved into a bigger organization and so on. But what it's making me think about is if we go back to what you were saying, that this is not accidental, that this is in a way of keeping people in the box. And obviously one could trace that sort of historically and connect it to colonialism and so on, particularly in India, where a lot of our modern education system, I think, was created by the British Empire needing to organize and control uh, people in different colonies. But if we extend that into the present day and we think about how education is a way of even good educate, even when we might talk about schools that we think are good or more enlightened, there's still, I guess, there's still this notion that we need to prepare the children for the world that
Yeah.
as it is currently. So, for example, we don't do this very well, but as a parent, even I think it's important for me to teach my children how to save money and use it responsibly and think about how am I budgeting my money, right? So I want to create a system where my kids, when they get their pocket money, they don't just go and spend it on candy. They keep track of it and they think about what they want to spend it on and they budget and respect all this sort of, because I'm thinking that's a skill that as an adult is really useful. And I see people, adults who don't have that skill and they struggle, right? They struggle in life. And so I'm thinking as a responsible parent, I have to teach my kids how to do that. But here's the paradox or the problem, catch 22 is yes, that's true. But if I'm just teaching them these skills that help them manage or deal with the world as it is, they're not maybe going to have the creativity or the freedom to be able to create something new or imagine something new. And if we think about the problems that the world is facing, in part due to our attitudes and way of handling money, we want, we need new ideas, new solutions, different ways of coming at these problems. And we need an education system that encourages that instead of training people to just cope with the world as it is. But that's a difficult balance. How do you think about that?
When I was traveling my first trip to Switzerland, to Zurich, I had a talk somewhere, and there was a whole bunch of people in the room. And they were very happy about what I was doing in India and creating nooks and these beautiful learning spaces. But they were very sure that this is good for India and they don't need it in Switzerland, that everything is fine with that education system. And in those days, even I did not understand enough. So I said, yeah, okay, it's your country, you deal with it. It's not, if you think everything is fine, then who am I to say anything? But this is the thing, it's not fine. There is the difference between Indian schools, maybe, and Swiss schools and UK schools. Sure, there's a difference in how much money is invested per school and what infrastructure exists, and maybe the detail of the curriculum and so on. But there is a very common and fundamental thread that permeates all education all over the world. And that thread is that the purpose of education is to create workforce. No matter where you go, no matter which country you choose, the goal of education still remains economy centered, economy centric, where the idea is constantly like, okay, how will we create more jobs? How will this create the child who has the skills to access work that is being currently offered? How this, and now the new one, which is, okay, how will we survive the AI evolution? And how will we have this? How will my child make any money when they grow up? We are constantly driving education through a fear of economy. And it is so internalized that even when we try to, just the example you gave, trying to show how saving can be done, we can sometimes pursue it from a position again of fear of being able to survive in the economy and contribute to the economy. And this is actually not even colonial. It goes even further back. It is not colonial, not industrial. It's actually rooted in that in the Napoleon Prussian War, and where a very interesting idea was born, which was later seen in Nazi Germany and then actually is internalized all over the world, which is the idea that the child is an asset of the state. And if the child is an asset of the state, we must educate the child so that child will, and we have to educate the child a certain way so that they can play a certain role in a certain economy. And this, you can't run away from this truth, no matter how expensive the school building, and no matter which country you are in, and no matter what part of the hemisphere and what part of the globe. So, what does a school really do? It takes a child who has all these natural curiosities, who has all these natural relationships, leave a baby on the ground, and immediately they find a plant or mud, leaves to play with. This is natural to them. They make friends very easily. It's natural to them. So, we send the child to school, and then what does the school do? The school breaks four of their most important relationships. They break their relationship with nature. That comes immediately, the first one. Then they break their relationship with resources. They make them feel that everything is a scarcity and everything should be, you have to try and amass everything so that you can survive. Money, oil, like whatever it is that you can name as a resource, it is some form of currency, it is some form of something, it is power. We break this relationship and start connecting resources with power. Then we break the relationship with community and family and their identity, right? So we make them believe that, oh, you are first generation learners. Oh, the village you come from is backward. Oh, the people you come from are forest dwellers. They don't know anything. Don't go back to them. That's not progress. And finally, when all that is done, we break their relationship with themselves. They stop even looking for peace and liberation and calm. They don't want these things anymore. What they start wanting is completely what is outside of nature, outside of community, outside of even themselves. They start looking for a better car. They start looking for a slightly bigger house. And this disconnection, I'm yet to find a state education system that is not making this disconnection happen. And so if we have to, it's not a balance. I don't see it as a way to balance. I feel that you have to go either with one narrative or the other. It's like the feminist movement, right? It doesn't make sense to try to balance feminism with patriarchy. What makes sense is to choose one. That's what makes sense. But we're terrified of making a choice. We are used to being diplomatic. We are used to trying to play both sides, keep our legs on both boats, so that somehow, if one sinks, we might survive on the other. But it doesn't work like that. And anybody can try it. If you put your legs in two boats, one sinks, you sink. You're just guaranteeing that you just increase your chances of sinking by 2 times. Because now, either one sinks, you're gone. So we have to make a choice as families, as people, as parents, as children who should be considered full human beings, as to what narrative we want to follow. Do we want to follow this narrative of learn so that I can participate in the economy and that I educate myself so that I have a future in this economy? Or do I follow a different narrative where my idea of success is going to be built as a combination of all of my four relationships with nature, with resources, which includes money, with communities, and then myself. And here's the funny thing. If we really look at history, right? And I had this debate at some point with some researchers in France who said that, oh, look at this. We are able to show with research that with greater education, we are becoming a much better society. We are creating more wealth, we are creating more happiness, and so on. This idea exists. But if we really look historically, then there has never been a successful model where chasing economy led to a beautiful society. And nobody has actually been able to do that. The only reason why Europe has the money they have, America, is because they were able to steal a lot of that money from a lot of the resources. But if you dial back enough, you go back 400 or 500 years, you go back to India 600 years ago, where it was contributing 23% of the world's GDP. Or you go back to the Chinese region, these were not even countries then. And yet, these were extremely successful economies. And you can read all the text and all the poems. None of them have any equivalent for like today's music that is all about money, cars, and having more luxury. No, all of the music and all of the text is all about finding inner peace, finding a way to live with community, figuring out what is life and what is the purpose of life, these higher thinking stuff. So they said that, hey, economy actually is not our goal. Our goal is community, and maybe even one step further, it is the person itself, like the meaning of being human. That's the goal. Economy is easy. Making money is not the hardest thing. We should not think that it is the hardest thing. We should not believe that it is the hardest thing, because when we think like that, then that becomes a ceiling. First, we never achieve it. And second, we are extremely paranoid that will be taken away from us. That we have to compete with others to get those resources. But when your goal is much higher than that, much more than that, when your focus of driving everything that you do is to build happiness around yourself, around in your community, then actually making money does not become the toxic thing that we currently know of. Doing business does not feel like you have to cheat a lot of people so that you can become a billionaire. You start living in a trustful society as opposed to the society we live in today, which is a trust deficit society. And you start seeing a far more successful economic outcome to that. Otherwise, Yeah, there is no great example of a democracy, as far as I know, that thought that, okay, we will put economy at the top and then we'll achieve it by keeping on improving education somehow. This is
Yeah.
there.
I love this idea of building happiness. Build happiness. Abby, I notice that you're a very compelling speaker. You have a way of speaking about these issues that is very inspiring. And I imagine that it's quite easy for you to inspire others. And you have a leadership quality, which I imagine draws people to the cause and to what you're doing. So I'd love to know a little bit more about how that's going. What have you built? Have you built happiness? What have you created since that revelation and that early developing of that space with the community?
Yeah, yeah. I think I don't know if the inspiring part is working or not, but I've definitely had an innate quality to piss people off.
Maybe
Um,
that's it.
and that's where you start, and you start first finding success in that, then worry about succeeding in inspiring people. But no, it's very interesting. The when I thought of making going from that space, and then I was very happy in that village. I was very happy with that space. And at one point, I was confronted with two options. One, continue there, stay happy, live that life. Eventually, the money will also come. It'll be all good. Or two, start an organization, take the responsibility of taking this idea to more places, suffer as founders of organizations, suffer, experience that toxicity, and maybe accept it to some level. So that maybe this idea of what new education or new reality of humanity could be can spread. But that means that you would have to dive into a very, let's say, it's not going to be as fun and joyful as just being in that space and learning together with the kids.
Yeah.
It's going to be quite terrible. And I don't know, something made me choose the second option. And so I accepted that. And I have tried my best that we'll try to build an organization, and we became a non-profit. We started creating nooks at other places, but we'll do it our way. And we'll do it in a way that, one, that puts people in charge. The communities will be the ones who are the leaders. They will not be beneficiaries. We will never see them like that. The day we see them like that, it's the last day that we should continue. Two, nobody will sacrifice. Everybody, or everybody who comes and works at Defy or works on this, should aim for and should get a happy environment, and as much as possible protect them from the toxicity of that actually the development sector seems to sometimes push people into. The idea is very common that if you're doing something good, you must sacrifice all your joys and time and freedoms, and you have to become this hard person. I felt there was something wrong in trying to help people in villages find happiness while making the people who work on that be very sad. So that was another non-negotiable. And we built that culture. It took us a lot of time because no matter where you hire from, we are all still coming from the same economic fabric of education. So it took us a lot of time to build this culture of actually seeking happiness as a team, as a community of people.
Yeah, how do you do that with your employees and people, your team? How do you re-educate them or bring them into that?
We constantly, there's many things that happen. There's a lot of conversation. We do opening circles, closing circles in the year, and like lots of stuff. But we also keep reminding them that whenever they're making a choice for the sake of the organization over themselves, and if we see it, we tell them that, why are you doing this? Why are you being this way? Please, can you be a little more selfish and put yourself before the organization? And this is very easy to say, but it is extremely difficult to internalize that every individual would come before the organization. And it's, again, I told Megha, my co-founder, she joined a year later. And the day she joined, I said, listen, we are not supposed to exist. An organization like this, an idea like this is not supposed to exist in the reality of the world. Every day from now, we will consider it a gift that we still exist. We will act very surprised that, wow. And so I'm very surprised. Oh, 10 years down, we're still there. What a beautiful gift, because it is not normal that an organization has a narrative like this would exist. And so we were never afraid of the organization closing down and we always went in with that, okay, don't compromise, stick to your principles, keep saying the things that you say. And that led us to have no money for 4 years, and that's okay. Still, just keep at it. And it is better to shut down than to compromise. It is better to not do it at all than to find some way of putting a nook inside a school and somehow make it look like, oh, now you can scale and now the school has become better. No, in your heart that, hey, this is not changing anything. And therefore, I'm glad we were upfront about it. So everybody who joined could come with that intention that, hey, this organization is very willing to close itself down, but not so willing to shift from the problem we are trying to solve and just exist for the sake of existing. And we probably would have been far more successful if we went down the conventional way. But it's not so bad. Today, there are 33, 34 nooks in 6 countries. The idea is spreading. Governments are believing in this idea. Communities are believing in it. And slowly, all of this is actually leaving the boundaries of an organization and becoming a movement. It's slow, but it's happening very naturally, organically, that we are stepping out of an organization that does projects and becoming a movement that has many leaders, many organizations, many people who all want to see that change in the way we think about education, and consequently, the way we think about humanity, because humanity begins at children. So the way you think about children is the way you think about humanity. That's where we are going. And I think my leadership or my ability to inspire is okay, but I think very soon it will not matter. It will not be that important, hopefully, because there'll be many people to inspire. There'll be many leaders who will take the charge and create action in places that I have never been to, people that I have never met, and problems that I've never probably seen. This will get hopefully out of hand and spread. And I hope it spreads faster than the sort of Elon Musk dystopian model of how the world should be, of how education should be.
Do you
I hope it's.
do you still have contact with do you still go in and work with kids in the nooks yourself, or do you find yourself more operational and just working with your teams?
It is getting harder and harder, and this is part of the struggle. But up until even 2 years ago, I was able to spend 5 months in a year in a nook, like living there, staying with, like, actually spending full time out of the 5 months. And in the last 2 years, it is getting harder and harder because I started playing more the role of connecting people and building leadership across this movement, which means that I'm not getting the best space to be in a nook and to be myself. I don't even care if nobody comes there. It is a very happy place for me. And so it is almost an internal mission right now, where I call it the un-CEOification. Like, I'm supposed to, at some point in about 2 years' time, get rid of this title of CEO, at least for myself, and become again somebody who was just managing a nook. I'm actually going reverse, but I need to play a certain role, whether I like it or whether I can. I like building this movement, and I like bringing people together, but that comes with constraints as to how much freedom you can have for yourself and how much space you can have. Be like, I sometimes feel I have to be smart. I have to say profound things. I have to say intelligent things. Whereas if you know me and if you spend time with me, you will notice that sometimes I'm just making weird sounds, and that makes no sense. And that is more me. And that the one who says amazing, profound things in podcasts. Of course, that's that is coming from thinking that is emerging. But I like not feeling the need to be super smart and just be in an environment and not have to show your wisdom or prove anything with it. But we can't have that. This is not the world we live in. I have to. I I made this choice that I want to do something to change this reality for them and to somehow make it happen with a lot of people in
Yeah.
this world.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? So there is a little bit of compromise there. There's a little bit of I have to embrace some of the logic of the world in order to make progress. But within that, you're also like the clown, like the contrary clown who sits backwards on the horse, facing the wrong way. And while the horse is going one direction, you're facing the opposite direction.
Yeah.
You're finding ways to move differently and to twist and change the way that people see the world. And what's beautiful is that you're passing that ability on, it seems to me. You're inspiring others to do the same thing. It's great. I love the positive, powerful humility of wanting to go backwards and step down and let others take the reins.
Yes. And I think of late I have started also feeling that it is important to feel this pain, that running away from it, this pain of compromise and this pain of not having this all the freedoms that you should have, everybody should have. The it is very important to feel this pain because that's what everybody's feeling. That's what even those kids who come to the Nook, sure, they have those 4 hours, 5 hours, even 10 hours sometimes, but then they have to still deal with the rest of the world that has no idea of that doesn't have any other way of behaving than the way they do. And they have to reconcile, they have to still stay true to this, that still find a way to stay true to the narrative while feeling that pain. And I think that pain is what makes sure that nobody forgets the mission. Nobody forgets
Ah,
what needs to change.
yeah.
And definitely, I shouldn't forget that either. And so that pain is extremely important so that I feel the urgency to solve this. And I think people do the best when they're not trying to solve somebody else's problem, but they're trying to solve their own problem. And this is very good reminder that this is still affecting me. This world and the programming I've had all my childhood is still, that damage is still there and it still affects me and will probably affect me for the rest of my life. And that is really important that I keep working or do my best to make this a different truth. Yeah.
Let's, I'd like to draw towards a close here, and I want to ask you about the future, which we talked a little bit about before we started recording, and what your kind of goals are. And but in to contextualize that, I also want to just draw another comparison here with clowning or make a connection, which is just the idea of children. It's quite a common thing that you hear in the clowning world that we can learn about clowning from watching kids because you see particularly very young children behaving in this way that is so present and just single track and reactive to the world in a way that we aspire to be in clowning. I think pure true clowning is really just being so connected and at one with your environment that you're constantly just like in a state of like reactiveness and connection and focus and falling over and trying things and learning is also an attribute of clowns and children. But there's also I sometimes I find a little bit of a patronizing kind of condescension about this way of thinking that oh, we can learn from the children like they're it's making them a little bit sacred and a little bit too precious. And yet, clearly, you have learned a lot from working with children. You're letting the children be the teacher in a way. And that's, again, a clownish sort of flip of hierarchy. So, what is it for you, given that thought, what is it for you that you would like to see be different as a result of your work or your organization in 20 years or 50 years from now?
When you were talking, I was reminded of how condescending usual education conferences are that say the word child-centered, and what they really mean is that, okay, we will all focus on the child, not that we will all listen to the child. Yeah, I think when it was the very early days of Defy, I used to think that's going to take 200 years to reach where we want to reach. And we didn't have a very good language. Of course, education should change, but that changing education is not as simple as changing a policy or a governmental framework or a ministry or no, or a curriculum. It's not so simple. So we should think it will take 200 years. But the more I worked in this space, my current estimate has come down to 40. It'll take 40 years. And 10 years have passed. So it's like a total of 50 years. And the reason why that time came down is because I realized that the same reasons why the schooling system is able to continue, which is that it produces people who will not question it, is also the reason why it will collapse, because it produces people who will not question its demise, its slow and impending demise. Sometimes I'm invited to universities and schooling environments, and I completely talk against schools and universities, and they still clap. And I'm like, okay, there's no. I used to think there'd be a lot of opposition, but there's no real opposition. It's only a matter of breaking through. The but what are we chasing? As I said, it's not to change education will require to change the human narrative. And the human narrative cannot be about building economies. It cannot be to use a statement such as children are the future. This is not a good narrative. Because when children are the future, then their present doesn't matter. In the present, we can sacrifice them, we can sacrifice their time, their rights, their freedoms, their happiness, their connections with nature and people, and so on. And then we can burden them with solving all the problems tomorrow. So the idea that children are the future is terrible because it allows us to destroy their present. And it doesn't serve really anyone. It only serves the industrial idea. But our hope is that in 40 years, the new narrative will be that children are the present. They are not some kind of incomplete animals that should be slaughtered in the name of economy when they are of the right age. They are not incomplete humans that cannot think and make decisions. They are not this that they are important and their life today is important. And if their life today is important, then you just can't do a bunch of things. You can't tell the child to not talk for hours. You can't ask the child to not spend time with their friends. You can't tell the child to carry a 20-kilogram backpack. You can't do these things. You can't cause so much mental damage that we are freely allowed to cause today. You just can't in that narrative. So that's one way of seeing what this future should look like. And therefore, changing education means changing the human narrative, what it means to be human, what it means to be society. And only then it changes what it means to run a school, maybe, or an education space, or an education policy, or an educational framework. Then that those things change as a consequence. We must change the narrative first. And I don't think that my organization will do that. I don't think any organization will do that. I have never read about an organization changing a system. I have only read about movements changing systems. It takes a lot of people thinking about a common future and acting in many different ways to get there. That's what this systems change will also require. This narrative change will also require. If feminism was a startup, then it would have probably ended up as an app. It would not have been what it is today, and the powerful movement.
I love that thought. And you're part of the Ecoversities network,
Yeah.
I assume, which is why you know Dan and who connected us. This is your project is kind of part of a bigger network of projects of wonderful. There's Manish Jain doing his unlearning work and other examples of this in India
Yes.
and worldwide.
And I'm so proud of that network because it makes me feel that as I'm trying to build a movement, I can also be a part of the movement. It's what is it called? Solar dust, space dust, right? Like in a strange way, humans are a very small, tiny part of the universe, but then it's particles from the universe that's inside the human as well. So in some ways, the universe is within you as much as you are within the universe. And this is the beauty of movements, I think, that nobody cares about ownership. Nobody cares about this name or that name. We're trying to move towards the same sort of goal, and being a part of this beautiful alliance gives so much opportunity to co-create actions towards that goal. But at the same time, we have to also be very conscious, and I'm always talking about this, that it can be very dangerous sometimes to feel that to be surrounded by people who are already agreeing.
Mm.
So with Defy, we are trying to reach people who are not agreeing, not yet in agreement. We are still talking opposite things. And so Defy gives a lot of opportunity to do that, to bring a very different set of people and to make them start having these questions. And maybe they will create some alliances and some movements, and this will all pop up really hard. And one day, maybe everybody will forget about Defy and it will not matter. What will matter is that we have to do our best to make this question exist in just enough number of people that it cannot be a question that can be ignored. That's all that needs to be done. And that's why I said it's not something an organization does. It's really something movements do, because it's not about how do you keep an organization surviving, but it is about how do you focus on the goal, on the problem, on the
Beautiful.
question.
Abhi, I just want to close. I've just enjoyed our conversation so much, and I want to close with a little reflection. And what I'd like to do is invite you and me to reflect on this conversation for a moment that we just had and just pull out one thing that we appreciate or gained from the conversation. So I'll start and then I'll invite you to do the same. Okay, is that okay?
Yes.
There are many things, but I think the thing that I appreciate most and at the moment that really connected most deeply with me was the moment when you were talking about not compromising and making a choice and how hard that is and none of us want to do it. And that spoke to me very deeply in relation to my own work and made me think about the difficult choices that lie ahead or that I am not making. And your whole talk is infused by that, but it was that one moment that landed. I really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
I think about compromise all the time. And I also really believe that it's not the puritanical individual who has run away and separated themselves from the problem that solve problems. It is people like us who are, who are suffering the problem, contributing to the problem, and want to change it. It's a very strange thing that somebody who's in the thick of it is affected by it is actually most likely to cause to make this change happen. And that's why it's not about leaders, it's really about the movements. But what stayed with me was the example, not the example, the story of how you told about you trying to help your child, trying to figure out ways to save. And this, they have to exist in this reality. I think that's always the most vulnerable and the most powerful moment, because it will always be an easier answer for somebody else. Somebody looking from the outside. It's a really difficult answer to find as a parent, as somebody who's trying to navigate two realities at once. And this is where we are. The transitions are always the hardest. It's really the most challenging. If we are expecting a new reality and we are living the present one, then it is going to be the source of a lot of pain, a lot of contradiction, and a lot of paradox. And but we have to believe in paradoxes. I think I come from India. This is, if any country in the world can talk about paradoxes, then this is the country. And we have lived with paradoxes for thousands and thousands of years. And we have built beautiful societies with those paradoxes. And actually, we start struggling when we try to get rid of those paradoxes. We do much better when we start acknowledging multiple paradoxes and start building possibilities for paradoxes to coexist. So it is this strange paradox that we must live, but I'm trying my best to not complain and learn from our forefathers the ability to accept paradox.
Yes,
That is it.
beautiful. Beautifully said. We can leave the complaining to the people in the offices who
Yeah.
are suffering more.
Yes.
Thank you, Abhi. Really just a stirring, inspiring conversation. And thank you for your work. And I hope that people listening to this podcast will feel enlivened and energized in their own work as a result of hearing you. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It was such a wonderful conversation.